And now I would like to transition to our UT Talks conversation. First and foremost, by introducing Jen Steele, our military reporter, who is really one of the best we have. Jen joined the UT in 2001. She has over 20 years of experience as a reporter. She covered the Marines for 2 years and was on the ground with them in Afghanistan after September 11th. Jen then later wrote about San Diego city politics, neighborhoods, and downtown redevelopment. Returning to the military beat in 2009, she now covers the Navy and veterans issues. Jen is a graduate from Princeton University. We're very lucky and fortunate to have her here at the UT. So thank you, and we'll begin the UT Talks conversation.
No. Okay, we're going to work. Oh, how about that? Yay! Victory. San Diego has such a wealth of military veterans, and that includes the Navy SEAL community. So I thought we for sure had to have a Navy SEAL veteran up here helping us interview Taya Kyle. So Bob Schultz is going to come join me on the stage. Bob graduated from Stanford University in 1974. He completed SEAL training the next year and served as a SEAL officer for the next 30 years, retiring as a captain in 2005. After that, he continued leading at USD, where he was the director of the Master of Science and Global Leadership program. Bob is currently a speaker, consultant, and coach for Fifth Factor Leadership. He and his wife, Marianne, have 3 children, the oldest an officer in an East Coast SEAL team who actually served with Chris Kyle. So please help me welcome Bob Schultz to the stage. And now for the main event, I'd like to ask our publisher, Prophet Doug Manchester, to come to the and introduce our main guest, Taya Kyle.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming and supporting Taya and the United States military. We live in the greatest country in the world, and obviously we're all prejudiced here, but we live in the greatest city within this country. And our military here is what makes it so great, and the freedom that we so enjoy. I've had the distinct privilege of getting to know Taya over the last couple of days, and you're in for an incredible ride here. She is she's everything and more, and what she's doing for the military is absolutely fantastic. And we all know her story, and Jan's going to, in fact, embellish on that as she comes up and basically reads a little bit of her biography. But you're going to enjoy reading her book, and I know that you've enjoyed The American Sniper. All of our condolences from the San Diego community and UT go out to she and her family, and we welcome here home, because this is where it all started with she and Kyle. So please welcome Taya Kyle.
So I want to give you a little bit of background about the story here before we launch into the conversation. Every Navy SEAL's story starts in San Diego. SEAL hopefuls come to Coronado for grueling training on the beaches of the Silver Strand, where they earn the right to wear the trident pin and become SEALs. Texan native Chris Kyle enlisted in the Navy in 1999. He deployed 4 times to Iraq with San Diego SEAL Team 3 before leaving the Navy in 2009 after more than a decade of honorable service. A SEAL sniper, Chris is credited with more than 160 kills, reportedly making him the most lethal sniper in U.S. military history. In January 2012, Chris published a memoir called American Sniper, which became a national bestseller. Tragically, on February 2nd, 2013, Chris was shot and killed by Eddie Ray Routh, a troubled 27-year-old Marine veteran who Chris was trying to help. In February, Routh was convicted of murdering Chris and his friend Chad Littlefield and was sentenced to life in prison. In December, the movie version of American Sniper debuted with Bradley Cooper starring as Chris. The film was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Taya Kyle grew up in Oregon and earned a degree in economics from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She was working in pharmaceutical sales in Long Beach when a friend brought her to Coronado, where she met the young SEAL Chris Kyle at a bar.
Imagine that.
Yeah, all good stories start that way, perhaps. They married in 2002 and have 2 young children. After Chris's death, Taya had to learn how to handle his business interest in addition to wrestling with her own profound grief. That story is now told in her new memoir, American Wife, which released this month, and this is the West Coast book launch for American Wife. Taya Kyle, welcome back to San Diego. We're so pleased that you're here.
Can I just take 1 minute? And the applause is so nice, but I really feel like there are a lot of people in this audience who probably deserve it a lot more than me. Anybody in the military or a family member, especially a wife of somebody in the military, will you stand and let us thank you? Thank you.
So we want to ask you about the book, and you write that one of the reasons you did a memoir was that so that your memories would be down on paper so you'd always have them. Tell us more about why you decided to write this book and what you wanted to tell people.
Writing the book, there were a few things that happened with American Sniper, the book and the movie, and a lot of times we would hear stories of people coming to us saying that they found a lot of healing in the story, that it really was their story too, which I think couldn't be more true. It certainly isn't just about Chris and me. It's a common experience. We had people from the Vietnam era that told us that they had started a dialogue with their spouse that they hadn't had for 30 years because it opened it up to a point where they could look at it just one step from the outside looking in. And I knew that there were a lot of wives who probably needed their voice to be heard, and they, maybe like me, are that silent warrior at home feeling possibly embarrassed or unpatriotic or something along those lines when they're nothing of the sort. But we're our own worst critics a lot of times, and there's some very valid things that wives go through. So this was an effort to try to help other wives of first responders and military to know that they're not alone. And the other part was that a lot of people love Chris, and they love the fact that he was this amazing warrior on the battlefield and a really easygoing guy. There was so much more to him, and so much that I loved that I wanted to be able to share with people who already cared about him, to say, if you think that was good, look at this.
I did feel like it was kind of a behind-the-scenes look at what was going on. If you see the movie, that's what it felt like to me. Your book felt like to me, it's kind of a behind-the-scenes look.
Right, I agree.
Well, I got the book this weekend, and my wife and I both read it. I was planning on scanning it, but I couldn't scan it. It just pulled me in. And my wife said, my daughter-in-law is the wife of a young Navy SEAL, and said, we need to send this to her, and she's going to recommend that it be read by, it was a great book for the spouses of young members of the military, young Navy SEALs. But I'm going to ask you, when you're talking to young spouses, what advice do you give them about going into this world? And apart from the tragedy that happened, you were in it for all those years and had the struggles there. What advice do you give to young spouses?
Well, I'd like to start with a disclaimer that I don't know that I'm the best person to give advice. But, I think that so many of these couples start out because they're strong enough and they say, I don't care, I love this person, so I'm in. And they start with that strong mentality, and then life starts to rip them apart. And the only thing I can think of looking back is that if my faith has always been very important to me, and so leaning into my faith, it was a journey that I began to do more and more and more of. The more pain I would have, the more I would be broken down and in a position to really go to God, because that was the only really solution for me at the time. I tried everything else. So I would recommend that, be God-centered. And then, you know, to not be ashamed and not feel unpatriotic in those moments where it's hard, but to reach out to other people and be unabashed in whatever your struggle is, so that you can talk about it and get that encouragement from friends and family. And maybe lastly, I don't know if it helps anybody else, but for me it always helped. I thought, whatever it is today, there might be, you know, my parents were married for 40 years, going on 50, and they're friends, and my mom told me, you might have bad days in a marriage that lasts that long. You might have bad months. She said, but honey, you also might have bad years, and that's okay. And you know, I look at that and I think when you're faced with deployment after deployment, sometimes it gets to the point where you think, I'm done. It's been years, I'm absolutely done. And I guess I go back to that and think, it's okay to have a few bad years, especially when life is pulling you apart, but sort of keep your eye on the long goal, which for me was, you know, a Christmas tree with our grandkids playing and us being together and saying, you know, we did it, we made it.
Thank you.
In your book is full of lovely and romantic emails that Chris sent to you while deployed. The one that touched me, he said, "One day I'll make it up to you. I'll be there every day and night." I wonder if you would read an excerpt from your book for us.
Sure. So I never know. People ask me what my favorite excerpt is, and I just don't know. And so ahead of time, they picked out this one. I'll set the scene for you a little bit. It's in Ramadi in 2006. I'll read a little bit of the background so you know where it's coming from, and then I'll read you the emails. Ramadi. Many people not familiar with current military tactics criticized Chris and all snipers for somehow fighting unfairly in Iraq, as if they were hiding far from danger when they went into combat. I wish those critics could have spent 5 minutes in the hell that was Ramadi to see how wrong they were. Far from being safe, snipers and the others with them were constantly targeted by large groups of terrorists and insurgents who used every weapon they had to try and kill them. Chris went to Ramadi in 2006 during his 3rd deployment to Iraq. Like Fallujah, Ramadi was in Anbar province, an area rife with Al-Qaeda and former Saddam loyalists. Sunni extremists had taken hold of the city, and the SEALs were part of a push to pacify it long enough for the local Iraqi tribes to retake control. In the media, the efforts were hailed as the Great Awakening, supposedly because the Iraqis had finally decided on their own that they wanted peace and were going to kick the bad guys out. The reality was a lot messier. The Americans had been criticized for operations in Fallujah and elsewhere that did a lot of damage to the buildings and local infrastructure. And unlike in Fallujah, there were still many civilians in Ramadi, as well as tribal leaders whom the Americans felt could be won over. For all of these reasons and more, the strategy in Ramadi was very different than Fallujah. Rather than moving through the city block by block, securing each area before moving on, the SEALs and others established small outposts in the worst parts, providing overwatch for operations on the streets nearby and helping arrest known terrorists. As soon as their positions were known, they became the targets. Insurgents, often using civilians as cover, would concentrate their attacks on the areas where snipers were posted. A group of 3 or 6 Americans would be attacked by dozens of enemy combatants. By now, Chris had a reputation as one of the best snipers in the military. He got his 100th kill soon after he arrived. And things continued to intensify. It was during this deployment that posters began to appear naming him as the, quote, devil of Ramadi, and offering a reward to anyone who could kill him. Those rewards eventually reached $60,000. But his emails back home barely hinted at the carnage. April 22nd, 2006. Hey, baby. Sorry I wasn't able to call you, but our phone line is down. I will try to call you one more time before I leave. I'm sure you haven't even checked your email yet, so by the time you do, I will be gone. I love you very much. You are an extremely strong woman. I don't know anyone else who could put up with all you do and still hang in there. Tell Bubba and Angel I love them. I will call or write as often as I can. I love you so very much. May 5th, 2006. Hey baby, I'm back for the day, and then I leave again tonight. Things are going well, just extremely busy. It's gotten to where people call up. They don't ask for SEAL snipers anymore, they're asking for me by name. The bad thing is, there are too many for me to do, so I have to pass a few on to some other guys. My platoon is very supportive of me, probably because I always take a few of them. But my sister platoon has a lot of resentment towards me. It's pretty funny. They're just a bunch of whiny bitches anyway. How are you doing? Are you healing up and able to get around? I hope you can do all the things you used to real soon. I know that has to be a real bummer to be limited physically. I also hope you're being able to keep yourself a little bit happier. If you need to resent me to be able to make it through, I understand. I know you love me and support me in whatever I do. I don't have to hear it all the time or call home to hear just good things. If you need to unload on me when I call, then do it. Whatever it takes to make you feel better. Is Bubba feeling any better? I hope his cold has gone away or goes away real soon. Maybe he will be a little happier and not so emotional. I miss that little guy so much. I carry around a picture of the three of us. The picture is of you and me in Oregon. One of Bubba is the one he pulled out from the computer cabinet with me and him sitting on the couch. And I have a picture of Angel and you in your bed at the hospital. I have such a beautiful family. I could not have asked for more. I am extremely happy. Sorry, babe, but I have to go now. I thought I had the day off until tonight, but I guess there is a mooge. Enemy equals mujahideen. Sniper I have to try to get before I leave tonight. I will try to call you before I leave. I love you so very much, baby, and miss the hell out of you. You truly are a dream come true. I love you, Taya.
So difficult to get, and probably something that you waited for every day to get those emails.
Right, yeah.
You were very frank in the book about not wanting Chris to re-enlist after you were married and had started a family. And when you were frank in the book about when he did re-enlist, it made you question his sincerity about wanting to build a life with you. The movie American Sniper has a scene that talks about that, and the DVD actually comes out for sale today. We have a clip that we'd like to show that, and then we'll talk about it.
Do you want to die? Is that what it is?
No.
And just tell me. Tell me why you do it.
Come on.
I want to understand.
Babe, I do it for you. You know that I do to protect
No,
you.
you don't.
Yes, I do.
I'm here. Your family is here. Your children have no father.
I go off to serve my country.
You don't know when to quit. You did your part. You sacrificed enough. You let somebody else go.
Let somebody else go?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I couldn't live with myself.
Yeah, well, you find a way. You have to. Okay, I need you to be human again. I need you here. Baby, I need you here.
I have two questions about that. First of all, it must be surreal to have Hollywood depict your life. What was your reaction to the movie?
Yeah, I thought it was really, really well done. When I saw it the first time, my biggest concern. I mean, look, you know, it's a SEAL, it's a man, he's doing his own thing over there.
Can't get anything right.
You know, I was concerned that they got Chris right. That was my biggest concern. And I feel like they absolutely 100% got Chris right. I think that, you know, Bradley went above and beyond to really embrace Chris from his soul and his heart, along with his actions, his accent, his physique, you know, the whole nine yards. And there are certain, you know, events in the movie that are just a little bit out of chronological order, but in all, it is accurate. There's nuances. And we didn't have a fake baby, we had a real baby. That goes into it.
And obviously Sienna Miller played you.
She did.
And what was your thought about her portrayal of you?
So, you know, it's interesting when people say, oh, do you know who you would want to play you in a movie? And I had no idea. I just really never, the only person I ever thought of was Sandra Bullock, because she can be kind of klutzy and funny and, you know, she can get the emotion across. But I think, A, she's really expensive. And B, I guess she's 49 years old, but girl looks younger than I did at 29. So I was fine with that. But anyway, I just said, you know, if the only thing I cared about was that they had somebody who understood heartache and preferably had children, which is not criteria that Hollywood typically would use, and I really don't think they did use that criteria, but it just so happens that Sienna met both of those things. And I knew nothing really about her, but the first time we talked, I felt so at ease, because everything that I was telling her, if it was funny, she got it. If it was sad, she was crying with me, and I felt like we were just two peas in a pod from the beginning. And I really give her so much credit, because, you know, it's the same as in real life a lot of times. I mean, she's getting totally overshadowed, but she did an amazing job. And I didn't think that even in the beginning of the interviews, because I don't look at myself. I don't know, you know, but friends and family who watched it said that she really nailed it. And the emotion, I mean, she makes me cry when I watch it, because I think she portrays it so well.
And just to follow up on that topic, so given everything that's happened that's turned Chris into sort of a national hero, was it hard for you to admit publicly that you actually wanted him to leave the military?
It is. It's a very uncomfortable thing. And, you know, it's interesting, when I go back, you know, Chris would say, well, she gave me an ultimatum. And to me, that's like the cardinal sin. You don't ever do that in a relationship, give somebody an ultimatum. And I remember talking to him multiple times saying, will you stop doing that? I didn't give you an ultimatum. I said I would take the kids, like you take care of those you serve and yourself. I'm going to take care of those I serve, our children, and myself. And we'll each just do that and see how it works. You know, kind of like, really? So you don't think that was an ultimatum? Because really you think that was going to work? You live in Oregon, me in Texas, and really, I mean, I have to acquiesce. He was right. I mean, whether I wanted to call it that or you know, do something to make a point. But I also feel that I didn't just do it for me. You know, I asked him, could we be stationed overseas? Is there something we could do? But the military, even though they're not supposed to do more than 2 back-to-back combat deployments without a break, they consistently sent him. And that's not to say anything about his command or the teams, because they all said it was time for a break. But there was another Master Chief who was in charge of making that assignment, and he had never been to combat, and so he flat out just said needs of the Navy. And so part of it was that I didn't trust that the Navy would keep their word, even if they said, if you stay in, we'll give you a little time off. And not off out of work, but I mean out of combat. And the other thing was, Chris was there to fight and to protect. That was it. That's the only thing that he really wanted to do. And there wasn't a job that he felt would be fulfilling enough, you know, to do. And so it really was a product of me looking at our family life and knowing how hard it was, but also looking at him. His blood pressure was through the roof. He was much more pale. He wasn't sleeping at night. He was very agitated and struggling, and I knew that he would never, ever stop. If it killed him, he would have kept going. And part of me wanted to make a point of this. I can't tell you every little dynamic that's wrong here, but there's a lot wrong here, and something has got to give, or it's just not going to work. And I don't know how that happens or what it looks like, but something's not going to work anymore. So it's a very long-winded answer, but I did feel bad about it, right? I mean, nobody wants to tell their spouse, you have the most fulfilling, purposeful existence in a job that you dreamed of, and I'm out. You know, I mean, that's the worst feeling in the world, and it does feel unpatriotic.
You had several good years, though, as a civilian family.
Right.
As a result.
We did. We really did.
Well, what you just described was common, not just in the SEAL teams, but in Marine Corps and other, and sometimes that is the right thing to do, what he did. But I want to ask you about your foundation a little bit. Last week, I was in Washington, D.C., and I met someone, and I told them that Jen had invited me to come join you here, and Oh, he says, tell her thank you, because the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation just gave our foundation a big grant. They called us and said that we really like what you do, and they gave us a great big grant. And it's the Quality of Life Foundation, which is impressive. And so tell us about your work with the foundation, and I'd like you also to address what is the unique niche that you have. There's a whole lot of philanthropic organizations support veterans, and what is your unique niche, and how are you playing that? Talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. It's so the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation. Frog is Navy SEALs, frogmen, because they're land and sea, and so I'll skip over part of the origin. We can do that another time if you're interested. But basically, the foundation, I did a lot of soul searching as to what to do, and like you said, there are so many charities that if I couldn't do something unique, I didn't see any reason to do something different. I would just join up with another organization. But I looked at Chris's core values of God, country, family. They're the same as mine. And I looked at how he introduced me to the side of first responders and law enforcement, and really helped me to understand their lives. And I've become very good friends with a number of people in law enforcement. And I realized that the divorce rate is so high in that group as well as veterans. And I looked at my life and prayed about it and asked God, what is on my heart? Put it on my heart, what my purpose can be going forward. And I really felt that the thing I knew most about and was most passionate about was that marriage, and that, there's a whole family unit that serves. And if we can help the marriages survive in their service, not just survive it, but thrive in their time serving, then maybe we affect a younger generation to also say it's good to serve and they can do it. So I looked back on some of my experiences, and I realized that, long story short, obviously SEALs are not only deployed a lot, but then they're gone training a lot when they're supposedly home. And so one of the training trips, Chris was in Ohio, and he called and said something had happened with the training, and so they unfortunately couldn't train the weekend. And I was in Oregon visiting my parents with my kids, and said, I said, oh, I'd give anything to see you. I can't believe you're doing nothing there, and I'm here, and we would even have a babysitter for a date night, and we can't even make that work. And I got off the phone, and my mother, who might have been eavesdropping, just a little bit, she said, I'm buying you a ticket, and you're going to go spend the weekend with your husband in Ohio. I thought, really? This is kind of exciting. Yeah, absolutely. Leave the kids here. So I flew to Ohio, and I arrived, and I was telling Papa Doug earlier too. It was funny because I was coming up the escalator, and Chris noticed that I got my nails done, and just little things that you don't really notice when you're in the midst of all the stress of life and all the craziness. We went to the hotel, and we did not leave that hotel room. We rented movies, we napped and caught up on sleep, we ordered room service, and we had such a nice time. Before I left on Sunday, we forced ourselves to go have lunch in the city and just see the light of day and get some fresh air. But it's one of my fondest memories, because usually if you're going on vacation, you have plans and things you have to do, or you're taking the kids. In a lot of military marriages, when the husband is gone, and I say husband, but I know it can be the other way, it's just easier, where it's the wife that's deployed, but the spouse who's gone all the time, when they get home, the other spouse wants them to spend time with the kids and feels like that's a priority, and they don't want to take the spouse away. And there's the money aspect, and the time aspect, and the planning aspect. There are just so many things that affect these couples, and I know for a fact that when you give them a weekend away, even in their own hometown, where they can stay in their sweatpants or whatever and do whatever they want with no stress, no bills, not at home where there's things to do, that it gives them longevity that I don't think you get really any other way. And so I'm extraordinarily passionate about that. And the grant that you're talking about was, I'm passionate about when I give to a charity, I need to know that they're going to use it appropriately, that the money's actually going to get to to the person that I want it to go to. And so we were very blessed to get a lot of different donations into the Frog Foundation, and we knew that we didn't want to just sit on that money, but we wanted to put it to good use, and we weren't going to do anything until we could do it well and do it right. So we've gotten some revitalization retreats underway, but before that, it was Chris's birthday, April 8th, and we wanted to do something special to celebrate his life and not just have that grief and that memorial. So we gave out what we called birthday grants, and we gave them to charities that needed a little bit of a boost, you know, not just a charity that's already successful and well known. So the team worked really diligently to find some really good organizations, and Quality Life is one of them.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know how many of you have read American Sniper, the book, but in your book, Taya, you say that writing that book did not actually help Chris heal. And I wonder if you could discuss why you believe that, and then I have to ask you, did writing American Wife help you heal?
So, you know, American Sniper, people assume that it would be sort of cathartic to go through and talk about that thing, or those experiences. But I think one of the things with PTSD and traumatic events in your life is it's sort of old school, actually, to think that talking about it a lot is really going to help. And I think we're finding that with a lot of people, that bringing it up isn't what helps the most. And fortunately, there are a lot of alternative type therapies that are really helping with the physiological part of the brain that's affected, something that nothing else can help, or the medications that nothing else can help. So Chris is a perfect example of that. You know, we went in, he didn't want to write the book. He wrote it because other people were going to write a book about him, and he didn't want it to come off not representing him, but more importantly, not representing the guys that he served with. And so we decided to do that book, and it was gut-wrenching. I mean, we were in a good place in our marriage, and it was taking us back to times when it wasn't so good. And he was at a point where he was kind of making that turn to where maybe he could sleep some nights. And, you know, when you bring all that up, then he wasn't sleeping again as well. And, you know, we were at a point where we wanted to be home and be with our kids, and then we were traveling. And it just ended up being an act of service that we didn't anticipate it being. Meaning, you know, I remember telling Chris one night, and I don't know if this is an American Wife or not, I forget sometimes what's all in there. But, you know, I said, we were climbing into bed, and I said, babe, you realize something. You're still serving with this book. And he said, what? And I said, you're serving. When we go to these book signings, and you hear all of these people sharing their story and telling you that they're getting healing, and thank you for writing it, you've done something really special with this book. And I want you to know that because he always felt like he quit on his country, which I couldn't imagine ever thinking, but, you know, he was his own worst critic. And so American Sniper ended up being okay in that regard because he could do good with it. American Wife was different because, you know, I would love to avoid really painful things and just focus on doing something productive or doing something good. And I was able to do a lot of things after Chris was killed, but I also knew that there was this massive weight, and I would cry sometimes, but and it's, you know, I talk about this in the book too, trying not to cry and trying not to fall apart and being worried that if I did, I would go down the drain really fast and it would consume me. And writing this book with Jim DePolice, who also wrote American Sniper, ended up being sort of a forced, I call it emotionally vomiting, you know, thing every time we talk. And fortunately, he knew me well enough and Chris well enough that he could just go with the flow, and whatever I brought to the table any given day, we would go through, and then he had the task that I do not envy, which is to organize all that and figure out how to put it in a way that not only makes sense, but is not too draining, hopefully, not too sad, but also has some of the humor and some real life stuff in it. So he's really the genius behind putting it all together.
So I have to ask you one kind of hard-hitting question, and then I'm going to let Bob have the last one. Your book is very frank about the difficulties of becoming famous on the national stage, and it made me seriously wonder if the better thing is to not write the best-selling memoir and to retain a private life. It's a tough question, but what are your thoughts on that point? Door's already open for you, obviously, but...
Well, I think a couple of things. One is I think that, you know, people have said if Chris was famous or if I was famous, I just don't think in those terms because I feel like it's completely irrelevant to anything that we're trying to do. And if we can help somebody, then amen, you know, happy to do it and all that. I think that I have a very realistic view of what I want to do with this book, and that's just to help somebody. And if there's an opportunity to help more people, then I'm all for it. But I don't I feel like every time I talk about this stuff, it's for the military wives who are out there, it's for the first responder wives out there, or even other couples who are going through their own thing. And so I feel like hopefully it's not about Chris and it's not about me. Hopefully it's about opening up dialogue and letting the country see behind the scenes of all of these marriages. And if I'm a mouthpiece for it, you know, I used to get in trouble all the time for talking at school. Maybe I was born to be a mouthpiece. I don't know. But, you know, that's I guess more how I look at it than anything else. So in that way, it's an honor to be able to contribute and to try to help.
On that note.
Well, you and Jim did a really fine job because it's an engrossing book. It's a great read. I really encourage you to read it. And you won't be able to scan it. It'll pull you in. You want to read all the words. But you've been through a lot already. You've had a really rich life, but you're still young. What are you looking forward to? What's next for Taya and her family and the people that you're close to and that love you and that make a difference in your life as you go forward from here?
It's a good question, and I think that one of the things that happened for me in this journey with Chris is that I may have a little bit of a type A personality, and I want goals, and I want, to have a path that I'm planning out, and I want to reach those goals. And somewhere along the line, I realized that that's just probably an illusion for any of us who think we actually have it all mapped out. And sometimes it happens close to the illusion, sometimes not. But my faith has gotten a lot deeper, and at this point, I really feel like my life is God's, and I feel like it's futile for me to try to figure out everything that's next, but I can tell you that I know I'm really passionate about helping marriages. I know that I'm really passionately in love with my husband, and I think I always will be. And I want to keep whatever he started alive. And I feel like, other than that, I want to be a really good mother and a good friend and a good person. And I know there are lots of possibilities, but I can't say that I know exactly which way it's going to go. And it's so overwhelming almost that I think it's more comfortable to just sort of step back and take each step each day that feels right and good, and let that be the way the path goes. But I don't know.
Well, you answer that question better than I would have if you'd asked me.
Let's ask you. I want to talk about you more than me.
We're here to talk about you.
Well, we want to open up the floor for questions from the audience. So my colleague is going to pass around the microphone. And please, if you have a question, raise your hand, and she'll come over and let you ask it.
I'm going to ask you. Hello? Turn the bottom. Hello. I'm going to ask the first question because last night you were so animated, and I think the people that were not with us last night would really appreciate the story about what happened here in San Diego and you meeting Chris for the first time.
All right.
No holds barred.
Okay, all right. Hey, listen, he asked for it, so if it gets a little funky, it's because he asked for it. But I get it. You want me to loosen up a little bit? Basically, as the story goes, and it's, it's true, that I was living in Long Beach, California, and my mother and her sister had a place in Imperial Beach. So a girlfriend and I decided that we would head on down to San Diego and go out on the town, have a little fun. And that night I'll go into even a little bit more detail. Like that.
You heard it here first.
So,
Do the children need to leave the room?
How young? Where were my Girl Scouts? So they, are they here?
No.
Okay, all right. So I went down there, and I actually didn't really feel like going out all of a sudden. I was tired. I had a long work week, and my aunt, who, as my sister says, would put anything in her mouth if they told you it would help her lose weight, had some no laughing. In Southern California, everybody's like, we're like that too. But so she had these pills, and I don't know what they were, but I took a half of one, and I think it was something to wake me up. And then my girlfriend said, we came down here to go out, we're going out. So I put on some leather pants and like a zebra shirt, and sure enough, we went down, and and I forget the name of the bar, but it's an Irish bar on the edge of the gas lamp, and we had some corned beef.
The
some
field.
scotch. Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. Well, not, yeah, Maloney's were getting there. There's another Irish place. And so then we headed down the street, and as we walked down, I heard the song, I Come From the Land Down Under by Men at Work. As a kid, I loved that song, so I was like, stop the presses. That's for you, stop the presses. Well, YouTube records. And I said, we have to go in this bar. And so I had a scotch or maybe two at the previous place, and when they said what the charge was to get in, I said, no, you don't charge that for a place playing Men at Work, because at that point it was kind of old. And my girlfriend, appropriately told me to shut up, paid the cover charge, and for both of us, and we went in. And it turns out that Chris, who, as Bob can attest, that seals are really never too much of a stranger to a bar for the most part, for some odd reason hadn't felt like going out that night either. Probably because they had been out excessively drinking every night before that, but he went out and he had kind of a baggy sweatshirt and jeans on, and we went downstairs in Maloney's, and there was a guy who apparently was a little bit obnoxious and annoying me, and I was kind of a little sassy mood myself, and Chris looked across, knew the guy, and thought that I was decent looking, so he thought, well, what I'll do is I'll break up that whole thing, do my buddy a favor, and get to meet this girl, and to win, it's a double win. So he came over, and he started talking, and I was asking him what he did, and he was being kind of coy about it, and he drove an ice cream truck, which I didn't believe. And then he also, the dolphins in captivity at SeaWorld, they lose their natural ability to produce a waxy film that they need. And so he was a dolphin waxer. He could wax the dolphins. Yeah.
I'll have to remember that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't totally buying that one either, if you can imagine. I mean, I had a couple drinks, but I wasn't that drunk. So then he said, okay, no, you're right. He said, that ATM on the corner of whatever streets? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm the guy that hands out the money. So he said, next time you're there getting cash, there's that little camera there. He's like, wave at me, and I'll wave back when I put the money in for you. So surely that's worked for some women, but I was getting a little bugged, and so I said, all right, fine, whatever. And I said, you're obviously military. You got a short haircut. Your accent's not from around here. So, what's your story? What branch and whatever? And he said that he had just graduated BUD/S, and I said, you're a SEAL? All right. I know all about all that then. And he was like, what? I said, oh, come on. Probably a little self-centered, a little arrogant, think you're all this. I know. Isn't that horrible?
Definitely not the officers. Yeah.
Not him, I know. So I'm going to sidetrack for an interesting fact here. You wanted animated, and I got a little Pepsi there. So the trident is, the eagle's head is bowed, and that's the only time you see it bowed, and it's out of humility because the seals are supposed to be very, very humble. And so I was very far off in my assessment, and I'll just say that. Are these TV cameras public?
Indeed.
Okay, so I'm going to move on from that. And,
You can see all of this on the YouTube website tomorrow.
So anyway.
We might edit.
A little editing
Yeah.
wouldn't hurt. It never hurts. And so anyway, and he said, he looked at me, and I can't redo how he looked and what he said, but he kind of cocked his head, and it was as if I really told him that the sky was purple. And he said, I would die for my country. Oh, is that self-centered? And he was so sincere in it, and it really took me back and kind of put me in my place, and that wasn't his intention, but I thought, this guy's the real deal. I mean, this guy is not doing this for any kind of ego. He really believes that he's there putting his life on the line for our country, and so that kind of opened my eyes to who he was. And then he did some other things that I thought were just so dang Chris, which is confident without arrogance. So he asked me if I wanted another drink, and I said, yeah, I'd love one, and he said, cool. Hold on, right there, I'm coming right back. My buddy's got my wallet, I'm gonna grab some money and come right back. And I thought, that's kind of charming, he didn't have to, he could have just been shy about the fact that he didn't have his wallet on him and just not offered to buy me a drink. But he was chivalrous, and he was confident enough to go out over and get it. And then later in the night, there was a guy that was kind of giving my girlfriend a little bit of a hard time, and I went over to just make sure she was all good, and I thought, oh, this SEAL is probably going to try to show off how, great his tactics are and get involved, and I was just ready for it. And it would have annoyed me greatly, but he didn't. And after I had talked to my girlfriend and realized everything was fine, I walked back over to Chris, who was just kind of leaning against the bar stool, and he said, "You all right?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay. If you need me to do anything, let me know." I said, "All right, I like that, right?" Like, I am perfectly capable of snapping that man's neck, but I don't have to do a thing. You just let me know. So I found that I was kind of charmed by him, and I asked him years later. I said, I was kind of a brat. Like, what made you hang around? And he said, well, it was the way you talked about your sister. I knew there was something a lot deeper inside of you, and so I thought that was pretty interesting. And it's about bar time then. It gets really crowded, and I don't like to be pushed around and all that stuff. But this time it totally worked out because I got pushed into Chris, and underneath that sweatshirt was like a rock solid set of abs, and he smelled so good, like just fresh shower, and all clean cut baby face. And so I kissed his neck, and then I just kind of looked back, and when I pulled my head back, I looked at him, and his eyes were big, his smile was huge, like, oh, hey, all right, And so then it was bar time, and we're going up the stairs, and as I'm walking up, I'm realizing that I might be a little intoxicated, and it might be just a little more than a little. So as we got up and hit the fresh air, I said, I don't think I'm doing so good. And he said, would you like a cup of coffee? And I said, sure. And I don't even know if we got the coffee. I think we did, but as soon as we got it, I said, what, that's not even gonna work. Like, I gotta get out of here fast. So he and his friend said, well, we're gonna walk you to your car. It's late, it's San Diego, it's a parking garage. And so they walked us to the car, and as I got right up to the SUV, I proceeded to empty all of the contents from the last 3 or 4 hours onto the parking lot. Well, he did hold my hair back very gently, very sweetly, kind of rubbed my back, and walked me over to the passenger side and literally buckled me in, walked around to the driver's side and made sure that my girlfriend knew where she was going, if she needed any help with directions, she was fine. And then, I went home, and my mother was reminding me not long ago that not only did I have my finger down my throat trying to get whatever else I could possibly, but she looked at me at one point and said, honey, take your finger out of your throat. There's nothing left. Go to sleep. So I was in a lot of pain, but the next day when we drove home, he called for like 10 in the morning, and it just made me love him more. So I thought, this guy he's not trying to have game and play whatever. He likes me, and it was fun, and he's checking on me and protective right from the get-go and kind. So that's the story of how we met in San Diego, where it all started.
Questions from the audience? Jack Harkins.
Yeah, Jack Harkins, Marine. Hi. I was so pleased when I received my copy of the book that great collection of photographs was in the center there, and they were so perfect a complement to the text and to the story. Frankly, it's the best I've seen in a book of that nature since my favorite Hemingway biography. So there had to be a great deal of thought and some serious values into that selection, and I thought you might share a little bit about that.
Thank you. My publicist, Sharon Rosenblum, is here from HarperCollins William Morris. Stand up, Sharon. Sharon's been with us since American Sniper. She started with Chris and has become a very dear friend to Chris and me. And the beauty is, and as it talks about a little bit in the book too, where we got our start, Peter Hubbard is the editor who started with us too. So they've seen a lot of photos from our family, and they've already had to pick through a bunch, but this was kind of a different setup. There was more there. And between Jim DeFelice and me and Sharon and Peter, we just looked at what is this really about? You know, it's a little bit about my upbringing, Chris's upbringing, our family life, the faith, the renewal, the aftermath, and so it just sort of needed to be a compilation of moments from all those different times in our life, and that's where we ended up. But I'm really glad you like it because it's hard to select all the different elements.
We've got somebody over here.
Hi, Taya. My name is Roy Dobbs. I met you 3 years ago when you came through the book tour. I always wanted to donate it to you or your foundation. I did give $100 when it first came around. I'd like to give you a signed book by Chris Kyle that you can auction off. It's also inscribed, which goes for quite a bit of money in the UK. So it's either for you or your foundation. It's up to you.
Very nice thing to do.
I know we have a gentleman way in the back in the hat.
Can I just say two things? One is this, Chris wrote, "We were lions led by dogs," which is awesome. And I also wanted to say that you're a perfect example of a quote that I heard from a guy who runs Troops First, and he said that a lot of times when you have somebody and they're in a ditch, you reach out your hand to help them, and they reach up with both their hands, grab your hand, and you pull them out of the ditch. But with veterans, it seems like when they're in the ditch, every time you reach down your hand to help them, they only grab your hand with one hand because their other hand is reaching back to pull up another veteran. So thank you. So cool.
Oh, there you go.
Hello? Okay. Yeah. Right there, right there. When you give Chris that ultimatum, I know you don't consider it an ultimatum, but it kind of was. My name is Roger Espy. I'm Marine Infantry. Been out for a little while now, but it's a lot harder to see yourself when you've gone through that lifestyle. Now, did you feel like you were losing more of him after every deployment, like a piece by piece, or did you just feel like he just wasn't in that world anymore, like he was more still overseas even though he was back? And was that the case where you just felt like he just was losing himself to that world, or was it just because he just wasn't like focused at all?
No, it's a great question, and first of all, thank you for your service. I appreciate it. And second of all, I think that maybe that's one of the hardest things when you're in a first responder or military marriage, is that it happens so slowly over time that it's hard to tell at some point, when did it change? Was it always this way and I was just romanticizing the idea of what it used to be? And I can't for sure say that it got worse with every deployment. Probably it did, but every time he came back, he was fighting to get back to a more normal and to be everything that everybody wanted him to be, which is impossible and extraordinarily frustrating. And I know that more now than I knew then, but I think that it's just very, very gradual and it's hard to tell. And at the same time that they're going through deployments, or y'all are going through deployments, the family structure is changing too. Kids are growing up. You know, the spouse at home is doing their own kind of growth and personal development. And so it's hard to really identify if it's just that the changes are too much, or if it's that the deployments and the stress is too much. I think that's what makes it so challenging.
So we have a gentleman over here.
Hi, Jake Schmidt, former Marine and FBI agent.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome. My question is regarding the sentence of the murder of Chris. What's your feeling about life in prison versus whether he should have received the death penalty?
You know, it's a great question, and the prosecutor came to the Littlefield family and our family and was wondering, and I'll tell you very briefly from a philosophical point of view, I looked at it and I thought, I have no problem with the death penalty. I really don't. I did wonder, and I don't have the answer to this, that if he believed in Jesus and my belief system, does that mean that if we gave him the death penalty and he went to heaven, that he's forgiven and he's in paradise? Because that doesn't sit well with me. But, you know, I know that I don't have the answers there, so I'd have to trust that that would be okay in some different way. And it says in the Bible, vengeance will be mine, meaning God says he will take care of that. But on the other side, you know, I told the prosecutor and the Texas Ranger that was there, I said, what kind of prison will he go to? And is there really any chance of parole, honestly? And the Ranger looked at me and his face kind of changed and he said, I can tell you I've been to the place where he will go, and it is haunting. He said, because everybody in there knows they're never getting out. There's no incentive for good behavior. He said it is a dark, violent, you know, ugly kind of place. And I said, that's good, that works for me. So, and the last point on that was when we talked about the death penalty, and I said, well, isn't it just, you know, every once in a while I go on this logical little tangent, but I said, isn't it more cost effective though to kill somebody? I mean, really, like I've heard that argument and I was just curious. And they said no, because there are groups around the country who now are working so hard at appealing every single death penalty case. And I've heard more and more stories now where somebody gets the death penalty and then every 5 years that family is dragged back into court to face this murder. So for me, I thought, and it's hard to convict sometimes with the death penalty because the jurors have to, you know, really be okay with giving somebody a death sentence. So with all that said, I'm very happy with life in prison without parole.
And our last question.
Hi, my name's Heidi, and I want to thank you so much. It's so wonderful to hear everything you're talking about, and I can't wait to read your book. As a fellow widow, although not a military widow, with kids, I was really interested to hear your thoughts about how you portray your husband to your kids. They have everything out there in the media about their dad, but then their dad was their dad to them and a person, and I just would love to hear your thoughts about how you've navigated that complicated thing about portraying their dad to them.
It's a great last question.
Yeah, and it sounds cliche or it might sound whatever, but I really am sorry that you lost your husband too, and I hate that we have that in common. For my kids, you know, I don't know, maybe I said this tonight already, but you know, I've heard it said, and I do kind of live by it, is that people will forget what you said and people will forget what you did, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. And for my kids, that's an extraordinary blessing because their dad laughed with them, tickled them, chased, played, got on the floor with them, and he also had high standards for them. And they knew that he knew they were capable of meeting those standards. And he was also cuddly and soft and loving. And so I felt like he was kind of the perfect combination of all of those things. And my kids know that their dad loved them without any question and that he was proud of them with their shortcomings. You know, we made kind of a thing around our house where, you know, Chris and I tend to be very self-critical, and, you know, my kids aren't far from that either. And so, you know, I always ask them, who's the only perfect person that lived? You know, Jesus. Are you Jesus? No. Okay, well then, you know, it's all right. Like, you know, we learn from our mistakes and we go on. And so I say all of that to say that I still am able to use Chris as an example for a lot of different things. And we laugh about him mostly. We talk about little things, or his favorite color, or what he liked to eat, and things like that. So I feel like he's very alive that way. And the fame part of it, you know, they used to ask us when the book first came out, is Daddy famous? We'd say, well, some people know who he is, but really, if he's a hero at all, it's because of the man, you know, he's your dad, and he's amazing at that. And I still feel that way, and they're too young to watch the movie and all that, although we did watch the trailer together. We went frame by frame for about 45 minutes and talked about things, because I knew they'd see it during NFL games at their friends' houses or whatever. But, you know, the other thing is I remember, and this is a way that to kind of tie it up, that I use the fame and the lesson of their dad. I remember my son, sitting against a wall and being very sad and feeling like somebody didn't like him. And at school, and I said, okay. I said, do you think that everybody loved your dad and thought he was amazing? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. I said, well, here's the deal, bud. If you're a good person in this life, and you are, there will always be somebody who loves you. But there will likely also be someone who hates you. And there were people who hated your dad, and for no reason at all that had anything to do with real substance or real fact. And it's okay. Your dad was okay with that. I'm okay with that. And if somebody at school doesn't like you, it's okay. It's not your problem, really. Just live a good life, unless it's something you can fix. So, I think like there are going to be lessons their whole lives that I can draw from Chris's life, because he lived a very full, very rich life with so many different experiences. And I do tell them, if you ever want to ask me your dad's opinion on something, I will tell you to the best of my ability, and if I don't know, I'll just tell you I don't know. That's it.
Wow. God bless you. I tell you, we give thanks and praise for the gift of your life. Bob, thank you. Janet, thank you. And thank everybody for coming here and sharing in this incredible opportunity. And we wish you all well. And we have the opportunity for you to have some, some treats next door in coffee. So please help yourself. Taya has been on a whirlwind tour, and she has been going since 5 o'clock yesterday morning, and she's going to have to leave here, but she sends her best wishes to everybody and thanks you so very, very much for coming. God bless.